beautiful plant, very early flowering, still a mist Schenkoana, variety Tubergeniana. My favourite time to move them is when they're probably only about this high. They're big enough to hold, but not actually open. So the next one is the most beautiful pterygiform with enormous flowers, and it's called Ivington Green. I think, Alan, you may have this. Do you have Ivington Green?
No, but I'd like to.
This pot is yours for a mere £4,000, Alan. You can have this pot for it.
Hello and welcome to episode 76 of Talking Dirty, over at East Ruston Old Vicarage, looking fabulous in forest green. And you cannot see his trousers, but I wish you could. In fact, do you want to get up so we can see your trousers?
Goodness gracious.
Look at those. I mean, how did you describe them?
A sort of Dolly Tartan look, I think.
Dolly Tartan himself, looking absolutely handsome as ever, our horticulturalist, Alan Edward Herbert Gray, over at East Ruston Old Vicarage.
And over in Cambridgeshire, we have the delightful and the thrilling Miss Thordis Maria Sophia Fredrickson.
Talking of thrilling, that is a word to describe our guest today. We are heading to the inimitable York Gate Garden in Leeds to catch up with its senior gardener, Jack Ogg. Welcome to Talking Dirty. Do you have any middle names to share?
I do. My middle name's Alistair, so it's Jack Alistair Ogg.
What is the story with Ogg? It's such an interesting surname.
To be honest, I'm not quite sure. It's a Scottish last name. My family, my father's side are from Bearsden area of Glasgow, and apparently it's reasonably popular in that area. But other than me and my dad, there's not many other Oggs in the phone book. Certainly not in Leeds.
Well, it's a very distinctive name. It makes you very helpfully Googleable. So I've been reading all about you. Tell us a little bit, a potted history, if you like, of you and your gardening adventures through your life.
Well, I've kind of always been in gardening. I left school and got a job in a local garden centre, and I was there for a while. I've done various college courses, different horticultural courses and that sort of thing. And then I was a landscape gardener for about 4 years, but that was a lot of paving and decking and that sort of thing, and not really much in the way of actual plants. And that's where my love is. So it was reasonably dull. So getting into actual horticulture was where I was going. I then was lucky enough to get onto the PGG course, the Professional Gardeners Guild. So I spent half my time working at Yorkgate, where I am now, and half my time at Harewood House, a big historic house. And then after that, I was offered the job at Harewood, just as a standard gardener. Standard gardener's a thing. So I worked at Harewood for about 8 or 9 years in the Himalayan garden. And lakesides, looking after those things, and I also did a bit of time working in the bird garden, which was quite interesting. I didn't do any bird-related keeping stuff. It was only the plants, but it was lovely. It was a nice place. So I really liked Harewood House.
Jack, I seem to remember that in Harewood House on the terrace, there's rather an interesting statue.
There's the Orpheus statue, and he's basically naked with a I think it's a panther, a puma on his shoulders, but he's a decent sized character. We used to get lots of people taking pictures of particular parts of Orpheus and getting rather excited.
The puma, clearly.
The puma, obviously, yeah, the puma's tail.
I think it's interesting that when that statue was commissioned, it was specifically asked for this man to be of generous proportions.
Yes, I had to stand there for hours while they modelled him on me, basically.
Hey, you show off.
You know, know, we spent about 74 episodes of this podcast not really talking dirty. It was called Talking Dirty because, having worked with Alan for years and been friends with him for years, it felt like the natural name for Alan Gray's podcast. But you've been so well behaved for so many episodes. I think Surreal Succulents have unlocked something and you've become extra naughty.
When you asked me to come on Talking Dirty, I went up in the loft and searched out my old favourite nipple tassels, but it was the wrong thing. It was a different one. It was about plants apparently. So not disappointed.
Quite a few people find us and think it's going to be a very different podcast. So sorry if you weren't here for plants, but that's really what it's about. And Jack, I mean, I've followed you on Instagram for a while now, and it's such a treat because you always post such unusual things. Have you always been drawn to the unusual all the way through from when you were young, or was there a point when you had an epiphany?
Yeah, I've always found plants that are a bit odd and maybe a bit smelly, or the flowers are a bit strange, definitely more interesting. I like a good decent rose or a fuchsia as much as the next person, but if the plant's a bit unusual and has, I don't know, a strange character to it, then it definitely appeals. I particularly like plants that use mimicry rather than reward as an option for pollination. So things like stapelias with their big sort of starfish-shaped, meat-smelling flowers. I find that much more interesting than...
I think that stapelias are the one of me as a child, stapelias. Aunt Patty, come and smell this. It's really lovely. Every boy should have one.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I've never grown out of that, basically.
And I think I read that you particularly like Amorphophallus, and what was the other one?
Here we go again.
Basically, plants of the Arum family, Arisaea, really work for me. It's a really exciting family, and it's got loads of great stuff in it. So I mean, yeah. So Arums, Amorphophallus, Dracunculus, Arisaemas, those kind of things.
Yeah, that's the one I wanted to say.
Right.
That's the one I was reaching for.
There's a fascinating tale of an Arisaema, and I can't remember which one it is. Jack, you may know. I don't know, but when they have that spathe and it has a very long, thin tip on it that bends forward and touches the ground, so that ground beetles can walk up that sort of tendril-y thing and get to the spathe to do the pollination bit. Yeah,
definitely. There's a few Arisaemas that do that, and they use different techniques. Arisaema griffithii, which I always struggle to say. Mr. Griffiths' Arisaema. Yeah. It's the end of it's the appendage even of the spadix, which coils out and touches the ground. And then you get Arisaemas like Arisaema intermedia or intermedium, where it's the spathe tip that, like you say, trails out and touches the ground. And it's ridiculously long as well. The plant is only a foot or so high, and the spathe tip is meters long, so well, a meter long sometimes. So it seems completely out of proportion. I asked on a particular Arisaema group that I'm part of, and I asked in the International Aroid Association that I'm part of, why it would bother, because you'd sort of think it would only need to be long enough to reach the ground, but apparently Arisaema intermedia grows on cliff sides, so the spathe tip needs to reach lower than the base of the plant where the tuber would be. Yeah, sort of makes sense, but yeah, they're interesting things.
Plants never cease to surprise, do they?
No.
That's absolutely amazing. It's interesting you say mimicry as well, because I think you're quite into orchids alongside all of these other things.
Yeah, definitely. More the terrestrial orchids I grow quite a few of, rather than the big, I like a phalaenopsis and a cymbidium as much as the next person, but I like some of the tiny little ground orchids. Some of the Dactylorhizas and Ophrys and that sort of thing work for me. And yeah, obviously they use mimicry, pretending to be a bee.
Yeah. Wonderful stuff. Well, I am super excited to see what your Flomo is going to be. In fact, we've been trying to set this podcast up for a while, but then you posted a photo of a plant and I got so excited and said, Jack, you've got to come on while it's in flower because we need to talk about it on the podcast. So hopefully you have that for show and tell.
I do have it, but brace yourself because it is tiny, and whether I can get the flower to show up on the picture, on the camera or not is another thing. I'll give it a go.
We'll have to make sure that we get photos onto social media as well. So if you're listening to the audio version, you'll be able to head over to our Get Gardening Now accounts and have a look at a picture. But here it comes in its pot.
So this one, with free woodlouse I've found, is, I think I'm pronouncing it right, Miersia, Miersia, Miersia chilensis, and it's a tiny bulb from obviously Chile, as the name suggests, and has these tiny green flowers. Will it work?
We can just about see them.
Almost. But it's a wonderful thing, and it's been in flower for a month, maybe more for me, and it'll keep going and keep going. So I mean, if you're into slightly unusual bulbs and interesting house plants, because it's easy to grow on a sunny windowsill, this is definitely a recommendation. Bit lax, bit unusual, grassy like foliage, and then these tiny flowers. But if you've got a good eye or a microscope, they're really interesting. Amaryllidaceae, so it's basically like a tiny miniature daffodil with a purple center, but certainly an interesting thing. Well,
yeah, it's that combination of, I mean, I love green flowers, and then the fact that it's got that sort of bluey purpley bit as well, and it's so small. I don't know why. I love that.
It's a lovely thing.
And Alan, I think we found a plant that you didn't know.
Oh, this one?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I didn't know. I've never heard of it. Never heard of it. But I mean, I like Jack. I mean, I have some sort of pretty weird and wonderful plants as well. I just can't for the life of me remember the name of it. But I think it's a member of the hyacinth family, but it has an enormous bulb, or 2 or 3 or 4, because it sort of kind of multiplies itself. And then from the middle of the bulb comes this green stem, and it never actually makes proper leaves. They're all sort of like jaggedy little bits. And eventually it climbs, actually. And if you rig something up for it to climb up, and eventually it'll give you some tiny little white stars as flowers. So, I mean, again, it's very unusual. I mean, it's not a thing of beauty, I will admit, but it's a curiosity.
I think I know what you're talking about, because I have one in the succulent house, and
you might.
It's a wonderful thing. The climbing onion.
Yes.
Is it? Yeah. I believe it moved to ornithogalum at some point, but I think it's back now to, it's something along the lines of Bowiea.
Bowiea, that's it. Bowiea.
Volubis or
volubilis.
Volubilis. That one.
That's it.
Teamwork.
A great thing. Definitely a good plant.
And I'm very happy to hear that the Miersia, however we say it, is sunny windowsill. We'll be happy there, because it looked wonderful in the kind of greenhouse setting. I assume it was in a sort of, I don't know, a heated greenhouse or something where you are. But I thought, well, I haven't got one of those, but I could sustain it on a sunny windowsill.
No, this plant has been with me for a number of years, even before I got to York Gate, and I used to grow it on my kitchen windowsill. I've given, because it produces bulbils and it's quite easy from seed as well, but I've given loads away and posted some to friends abroad even, and it's very easy. Multiplies and grows readily on a windowsill, and then goes dormant for the summer as well. So it's a bit of interest for winter when not much else is doing.
Well, that's lovely. I thought I can see one of those coming your way.
I've got a number. I'm sure I could rustle up 2 out of that pot.
I'll see how I do with it. The other half keeps telling me there are too many plants on the windowsill, but clearly that isn't a thing.
No, need wider windowsills then, obviously.
Yeah, just bigger house, more windows, fill all of them with plants. So you said you brought that one, you kind of added it to the York Gate collection. Are there things that you've been sort of moving across from your personal collection into the York Gate one?
I think mostly Aroids are the things that I've brought to York Gate. There was some reasonably, well, some very nice plants. Arum italicum, whichever one it is, Arum, italicum, Marmoratum, or one of the many named cultivars of it.
Pictum.
Yeah, exactly. Those that was at Yorkgate and is a weed everywhere.
Interesting you should mention those, Jack, because I went around the garden the other day, and I don't know, well, back to square one. When I first came to this garden, there was nothing here. But my family house in South Norfolk, they had an Arum italicum, or it might have been the other one, Marmoratum, but it had black spots on the leaves, and that fascinated me. So I went back to my granny's house and I dug some up and brought them to the garden here, and they're still here. And then I got one or two others, and I started looking at, they obviously cross when they're in flower. They're pollinated and they cross-pollinate, and then the seedlings come up. Second year, of course, they get their true markings, the seedlings. So if you grow some from seed and they're all green, don't do what I did and throw them out in disgust. It's silly. But there's numerous varieties of size of leaf, pattern on the leaf, whether the leaf is silver marked or veined or even splashed with gold, yellow. I think it's a fascinating thing, and you've got these all winter.
Yeah, definitely. And it's not just, obviously, our native Arum maculatum with the black spots on the leaves is a fantastic garden plant. But there are a number of Arums that we can grow in the UK that should be more widely grown, and people just don't. I have 3. This one is, if you see that, the leaf is really sort of strongly sagittate with these extra long lobes at the base.
It's quite a large leaf too.
Yeah, and it'll get quite a bit bigger than that as well. It's difficult to see on the picture, but it's got white markings on the leaf as well.
Yeah.
But that one's Arum concinnatum, and it's got a really fantastic pure white spathe with a yellow spadix in the middle, and a really lovely plant. And then obviously, like we said, there's the Arum italicum and in all its various forms, which is to go with cyclamen and snowdrops and eranthus and stuff at this time of year, that is just a fantastic foliage plant, and hard as nails, takes minus temperatures really well. Arum pictum is by far the best Arum for me. Autumn flowering, so quite unusual. It flowers before it gets its foliage, so you just get these purple Arum flowers sticking out of the ground first, and then the foliage comes through and stays through the winter and into early spring.
So when does it flower, Jack?
It's autumn flowering, so it'll flower, I guess it's kind of September time. I'll have to check on that one completely. I do have pictures of this, so that'll be dated.
I'm so glad I'm not the only one who suddenly thinks, hang on a minute, when was it?
Yeah, I say that, and then I think it's September, but
time's such a blur.
Just basically all of the other family, all of the rest of the Arums are spring flowering, and Arum pictum is the only one that is autumn flowering. But lovely, and also the leaves are incredibly thick and glossy, really tough. Very nice leaves, and there's Arum pictum var pictum and Arum pictum sagittifolia, and they've got really nice silver markings on the leaves and the same evil smelling purple flower in the autumn. So it's a great one to grow. It's a lovely one.
I'm so glad you brought Arums along, because Alan has been getting quite excited about Arums over the past few weeks. I don't know if you've just sort of been spending time in your garden, Alan, and just marveling at them, but you bring a lot of Arum enthusiasm to the Talking Dirty podcast.
Well, I'll tell you what I have been doing. I mean, I've been going around and I've been labelling those that are they're germinated at the bottom of hedges, so they're obviously bird sown, if you see what I mean. And so I've earmarked those that are worth digging up and moving elsewhere, so that when they go dormant in April time, I'll be able to go out there and dig them up and transfer them to where I want them to be.
Oh, exciting times. What is next, Mr. Ogg? What are you bringing next for show and tell?
Well, going away from the Aroid thing, I've got another bulb from Chile, basically. Ooh. Similar to the Miersia, little 6-petaled brown star-shaped flowers and one very long, incredibly boring-looking leaf. But it's a good plant. So
that is an extremely long leaf.
It is, and I'm not even sure that this plant is fully grown. This leaf can get a lot longer, and it only ever makes one per bulb. And then on the top of, see if I can get it into the camera.
Oh look!
Get these.
Oh, look at that.
I'll get a good picture of it for you. 6-petaled, star-shaped flowers that smell like pond water. So it's an unusual one again, and that one is Gethyum atropurpureum.
That strikes me as a very Jack Ogg plant.
Oh, it's a lovely plant. It's a great one. A friend at Edinburgh Botanics sent me this one, and it was a tiny little bulbil, and I've grown it for, well, I've had that one for about 5 years or so. In the first few years, I just had this one long, incredibly dull leaf. So it did make me question a few times whether I kept this thing going, but then it rewards you with these fantastic.
That Gethyum, it has something in common with some Streptocarpus species, because some Streptocarpus species have just one big leaf, don't they?
Yeah. There's a really nice one. I think Mike Clifford, who you've had on the podcast before, grows one with a giant leaf, and it's something along the lines of smithii, and it has fairly small red flowers and then one enormous giant leaf. I tried to grow it from seed once and failed completely. So one day I'll have it.
Why do these plants only have one leaf? Do we know?
Do you know? No, I've no idea. It seems like a really risky maneuver to do, really. Like you say, one of my favorite plants, Amorphophallus, the Titan Arums, they only make one leaf, one huge single petiole with a massive umbrella leaf on the top of it, and you sort of think that's a very risky move to only make one leaf, and if something damages it, then that's it for the year, and you have to wait until the next growing season to produce a leaf.
Yeah, but evolutionarily, why have these plants decided to go for such a risky way of growing? But maybe somebody knows. Tell us if you know.
Yeah, I'd love to know. If somebody tells us, then I'll add that to my brain.
It was interesting you said earlier that you were in some really fantastically niche sort of international groups.
Yeah. One of the groups I was talking about was just a Facebook group. Facebook and some of these things have got some fantastic groups. You know, I'm like I say, the Arisaema enthusiasts or that kind of thing. You know, and they really are. I mean, geeky is the wrong word, but they're niche for people that like a particular group of plants. But they're full of people with real knowledge that it would be difficult to tap into otherwise. You know, but they've joined these Facebook groups so you can ask these questions. So it's good.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
And the International Aroid Society is an actual group that you can join. Well worth joining.
Just so happy it exists. And also, we are all about celebrating geekiness on this podcast. I mean, that is just the essence of what we do.
No, it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing to be geeky.
Geek out, week in, week out should be our slogan. Well, we've had some fantastic show and tell so far. What do you have any others up your sleeve?
I've brought in quite a few bits, really. You notice this Impatiens in the background. That really was just my backdrop, but it is especially nice. And I'm going to use it en masse in the tropical garden this year. I've taken loads of cuttings. I must have 50 odd cuttings of this, and I'm going to use it as bedding. It gets to about 1.5 meters tall when it's fully happy. Let me see if I can bring it down. It's not a good picture. It's Impatiens sodenii, and it's a giant one. It ends up almost with a woody base to the bottom of it, but then these big succulent stems and tons of quite large, almost an inch or so across white flowers with a pink center. So a nice one.
Lovely leaves on that.
I've also got that, and I've got it in the mauve, a mauve colour.
Right.
And it was one of those things that's just sort of passed around in like country house gardens, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, yeah.
I went to Helmingham Hall one day, and we were talking to Zar Tolimash, who lives there, well, she doesn't now, but she used to live there. And she said, "Oh, take a plant. We've got loads of it." So I took this whopping great, big old pot like this on the side, in the car, on the back seat, and off we went. And so I've got what you've got, the white one with the pink centre, and I've also got the mauve one. And the one thing I would say about them, they do bed out very, very well.
Right.
Just don't put them out too early. But they shady spot, doesn't matter whether it's cool or not, they love it.
I've got quite a number of Impatiens. It seems to be a thing with me. I'll get one genus of plants and then suddenly I need to collect them all. I went a bit mad on solanums last year and that sort of thing. But I've got quite a few Impatiens that I use. Some tiny ones, the Kilimanjaro and the pseudoviola, and then giant monsters as well that I'm planning on using. So,
have you got Flanaganii?
Yes, the tuberous one with the big.
Yeah,
it's lovely.
I got Flanaganii. I know it's in a pot, and if I don't take it out of that pot, it's going to break it because it's a terracotta pot. But somebody told me that you will get, when it gets big enough and mature enough, it will make tubers up the stem, and it looks like it does that, and it's in the greenhouse, and it looks like some horrible disease.
Like it's got some growths on it.
Yeah.
I've found it to be hardy. I left some tubers in the ground by accident, and they came back fantastically this year. So well,
I have heard that, Jack, and if you can do it in York, well, I can do it here in Norfolk. So as I only had one plant, I've kept it in a pot, you see. But now that I've got all these tubers, I can make lots more. And I did take cuttings before we took it in for the winter, so I've got an heir and a spare.
Nice, excellent.
Yeah,
I think on that line, my most successful Impatien thing from last year, I took a load of cuttings of Impatiens Arguta Blue Dream, and I stuck them in the bare root cuttings in the trunks of the tree ferns in the tropical garden, and they all rooted in and grew as epiphytes and kind of clothed the trunks of the tree ferns growing.
Now, Jack, you've just struck up a brilliant idea, because everybody, all these people that are interested in gardening, and especially exotic or tropical and that kind of thing, they've probably got a tree fern, and they've probably got something growing out of it, like an evergreen oak tree or an acacia and all those sort of things. We all do that, but you just given me this wonderful idea to use Impatiens as use the Dixonia as a host for the Impatiens. I think it's brilliant. What an idea, cracking.
I've used a few different plants. Obviously, I use tillandsias on them. You hang the Spanish moss from the fronds themselves, and then some of the bigger tillandsias like bergeri and stuff actually tucked into the crown, so they look really nice. But then I've used Remusatia, which is the colocasia relative with a much smaller leaf but nicer markings on it. And apparently it grows as an epiphyte on mossy branches in its native home. So I thought, whack some tubers in the trunk, see if they grow, and they did really well and grew fantastically. I even got runners and rhizomes trying to plant themselves into the tree fern.
What's that plant related to?
It's like a miniature colocasia. It's I think you say it Remusatia, Remusatia. Remusatia, I've heard people say, but I don't like that pronunciation. So
Remusatia.
Yeah.
I mean, how satisfying, a great idea, and then to see it come to life so well that the plants just settle right in and start kind of going off on their own exploration.
They were almost happier in the tree fern than they were in the ground, because I planted them below as well, so it kind of looked like they were growing up from the ground up into the tree fern, but they were better off on the plant than they were growing in the soil below. So it's worth a go with these things. It's worth giving it a go and seeing if it works, because if it doesn't, then you've not lost anything really, especially if it was cuttings.
There are some amazing things going on in that head of yours, Jack.
Whatever is going on needs sealing in concrete and dumping in the North Sea, I think sometimes. The plant things are good. I'm okay with the plant stuff.
You mentioned that you kind of got ideas brewing for this year in Yorkgate. Are there any kind of things in particular that you're excited about, or you're not sure, touch and go, whether they're gonna work, but you want to try it?
I mean, as always with anything that I do, Aroids have got to be involved in it. So I'm going to use Sauromatums, the voodoo lilies, en masse this year. And again, the Amorphophallus that I grow, I'm going to plant them in the ground so they give a bit of something different. I mean, I love a tropical garden in lots of different ways, but I'm trying to use stuff that people don't necessarily know, and sometimes even good gardeners will turn up and maybe not recognize some of the things, which is, it's not a snobby way of doing it. It's just, it's really nice for people to arrive and find something a bit different.
Well, that's what happened to Alan. I just remember so vividly the day that you'd been to Yorkgate and you came back just raving about it, because there were so many great ideas and so many plants that were unusual that you didn't necessarily see when you visited a garden normally.
Well, when I saw Yorkgate, I was absolutely blown away. And I think I'm giving a talk to a hardy plant group up in York next year, maybe. And so I'm going to have an overnighter, I think, and come and see Yorkgate again, because it's one of the gardens that I tell everybody that they should see, because the ideas in it, I think it's not a grand garden, is it, Jack? I mean, it's quite domestic in scale.
The old Yorkgate, the original garden that the Spencers had, is only an acre, so yeah. It's definitely petite, but it's that works in its favour really, because people can take something home. It's a bit more like your own back garden might be, you know, so you can take that scale home and use it.
I thought that was wonderful.
If people can't get to Yorkgate, if you're one of our listeners in America or Australia or India, well, hello to various people all over the place. We did talk to, well, we've had Ben Preston, your head gardener, on a couple of times, and I think probably in the first episode we'd have talked a bit more about the whole sort of garden and the garden rooms and the history of it. So we'll link to that so you can easily find it and go back and watch. In fact, we've had a promise that you and Ben might do a double act one of these days on the podcast, Jack.
That would be interesting, I think.
But it's certainly a garden where there are wonderful plants to be seen, and clearly you're all kind of encouraged to experiment and to kind of live your gardening dreams in the garden rooms.
Oh, definitely, yeah. I mean, it's kind of nice because the Spencers that had the garden, that left the garden to Perennial, who is the charity that owns Yorkgate, they planted new stuff all the time, and were always planting interesting, unusual things. We've got a lot of their records of the plants they bought, and so it's an excuse for us to go, well, they probably would have planted it if they had it. So if we get something interesting and something unusual that's new, you can kind of justify it by saying, oh, well, they would have done it. If they had it, they would have planted it. So we get around it.
I love that. What other bits of show and tell have you got? Have we exhausted it yet?
I have this one, which is very nice.
That is one of the strangest things that's ever been brought to Talking Dirty.
Obviously, I think it's quite fitting. Maybe it's an unusual shaped thing. This is one of my favourite plants of all time, really. This is Sauromatum venosum. So the voodoo lily, or monarch of the East, is the other or lesser used common name, but I think it's a fantastic common name for it. But this one is a really special one because it's Sauromatum venosum Lake Tana, and it's collected from Lake Tana, which is in Ethiopia. And rather than the usual kind of red mottly flower that it's got, this one has a yellow flower with a yellow spadix. It still smells terrible. It smells of carrion and is covered in blue bottles, but it's a really unusual one, and it's quite a rarer one to get hold of than the usual form. But interesting. I love it.
It's certainly unusual. I take it you don't have that one, Alan.
No, I don't. But I mean, I've got you know, something quite similar with the good old Dracunculus vulgaris. Yeah. But I remember we had a visiting vicar in the garden one day who was he was such a funny man. You know, you always tend to think of vicars as being sort of somber and all the rest of it, but he was just a joke a minute. And he was with his mum, and he was on our plant stand, and he saw Dracunculus vulgaris for sale in a pot, and he looked at me and winked, and he said, "Mother, this is a plant that you really must have."
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, out of the hardy aroids that you can grow, that one definitely packs a punch when it's in flower. It's
and I think there's a white spathe version of that, Jack, isn't there?
There is, and out of the genus, there's Dracunculus vulgaris, and then the only other one is Dracunculus canariensis. And
oh, look, it's like it was planned.
I have it, so I'm really pleased about that one. And it's a nice plant, and actually smells nice, which is unusual. The flowers smell of primroses and slightly like lemon, a bit like lemonade, that sort of thing. And it's got a white spathe and a yellow spadix, and is lovely. A really nice one, but nowhere near as hardy. Dracunculus vulgaris is completely hardy, and canariensis definitely isn't, but it's worth growing in a pot.
Yeah, it looks lovely, that one.
Yeah, it's nice.
It has occurred to me that your family, I mean, is your kind of house and garden at various points in the year just slightly stinky?
Yeah, fairly regularly. Yeah. I've got a really big patch of it's Arum Dioscoridis var Syricum, or Syricum from Syria, which is a really lovely green-leafed arum, and then has these big spathes that are all mottly with it's kind of a yellow background and purple spotting on them, and that is in my front garden. And I got a phone call from my wife earlier in the spring saying, "I think something is rotting in the bins, you know, so you could really need to move the bins well away from the front door because they're smelling terrible." And it turned out it was this arum had opened 4 flowers in one go and was filling the whole front garden with smell. But it's a wonderful thing. So yeah, definitely, I've got lots of smelly plants in my garden at home, much to my wife's distaste.
And I think you've got 2 little boys. What do they make of all of these stinky plants?
I've got 2 boys and a daughter as well. I've got Ellis 11, Ewan who's 10, and Poppy who's 3. They are mostly not interested. If it's not on a computer screen, if it's not in Minecraft or Fortnite, then they're not especially excited. Though I do have a picture that I will give you of my boys holding the Sauromatum that I mentioned earlier. Has got a giant form called Sauromatum Indian giant, and I've got a picture of my boys stood next to one of these, flowering in my back garden, looking unimpressed. But it's a lovely thing.
One day they will understand, and they'll follow in your footsteps.
Forcing it upon them, basically, whether they like it or not.
Now, are there any more bits of show and tell that we haven't covered?
I have an Amorphophallus tuber, which is a pretty nice thing. Amorphophallus definitely are one of my favourite plants, but not hardy. But again, they're so unusual with that one single giant umbrella leaf, and then really interesting looking markings on the petiole. So definitely good. Really interesting.
I'm in Cambridge, and every so often, rarely you'll get these exciting press releases from the Botanic Garden about which one have they got?
It's the Titan Arum. It'll be Amorphophallus titanum, which is the corpse flower, the huge. It's touted as the biggest flower in the world, is it? But it's technically an inflorescence because it's a number of flowers packed onto that spadix. So it's not the biggest.
No, the largest flower in the world was on David Attenborough's new program about 2 weeks ago.
Is that Rafflesia?
Yeah, Rafflesia, and it's a bit like our smelly thick cactus things, succulents that we had when we were boys. But it has a flower that's like a metre across. It's huge.
Yeah, it's a wonderful thing. If only I had a giant greenhouse to grow the vine.
You need a giant greenhouse, Jack, for that. And a giant heating bill, I think, as well.
Yeah, quite possibly. Put it on Ben's credit card, it'd be fine.
Well, I tell you what, the last sort of 3/4 of an hour or whatever have absolutely flown by in an amazing array of plants. I think we've got serious flow. I've seen Alan scribbling things down left, right, and centre, getting inspired for planting things into his Dixonia. So
yeah,
interesting.
I mean, that is a stroke of genius. I don't know why I've never thought of it, but it's me age, you know. But I think, you know, that's a genius of an idea. And I mean, if you can take one thing away from a podcast, I will certainly be planting anything that I think might grow in the trunks of Dixonias. I've got enough of them after all. I mean,
you have.
They're a lovely thing in their own right, the trunk of a Dixonia, but I kind of feel like it's such a good rooting media on the trunk itself. It would be a shame not to jam loads of things in.
No, you're right.
See what grows.
So I think we know where Alan's FLOMO is going. If you are listening to the Talking Dirty podcast for the first time, FLOMO is a feeling I live with day in, day out. It's a sort of fear of missing out about flowers and plants. Clearly, Jack goes around sort of after stinky plants day in, day out. But you, alongside sharing little brown flowers and various curiosities, you shared something I've been after or wanted for a while on your Instagram, Jack, probably a few months back, a fuchsia procumbens, which I know isn't like the showiest thing in the world, but there's something about the blue pollen, about its sort of delicate tubular manner that I adore. And clearly you've got that one at York Gate.
I do, and it's proved hardy for us as well. I wasn't convinced whether it was actually going to be a hardy perennial or not. I grew it in a pot for a while and it looked terrible. So I kind of, almost in giving up on it, planted it in the rockery. So it's got really sharp drainage under its feet and it's tucked up against a rock. And it's been really hardy. It's been great. And like you say, with those kind of green upwards facing flowers, it's definitely an unusual one. It makes plenty of seed pods, plenty of berries on it. So I'll chuck one your way when it's making them again.
This is exciting because I've never seen it in berry, but does it have like little pink berries?
It's got fairly like a small grape-sized purple berries on it. The berries are bigger than the flowers. It's an interesting thing. Kind of pinky purple berries.
Wow. Very exciting. So that's where I'm at FLOMO wise, and also the Miersia. I still can't say it.
I can't say it, and I grow it, so it's okay.
So there's definitely two that I came into this podcast with. Where are you at with your FLOMO, Jack?
Mine are Aroids, I'm afraid. I've got two Aroids that I've always been after, or been after since I found out about them, and nobody seems to grow them. One is, I think I'm pronouncing it right, Symplocarpus foetidus, which is the American polecat weed. It looks a bit like a miniature version of the skunk cabbage that you see as a weed all over the place, the yellow big skunk cabbage. But this one has got an unusual red flower, really hooded, sinister looking thing. And its flower produces its own heat and melts the snow round the flower as it's coming out early in the year, and then it's got these big cabbagey leaves afterwards. But one I definitely want.
That's amazing. I have not heard of that. That sounds incredibly.
I'll send you the spelling because I'm not convinced that how I pronounced it was correct. But Symplocarpus, I think it is.
Wow, I love the fact that it melts the snow. What a fantastic evolutionary development.
Yeah, definitely.
So was that your main one? Was there another one as well?
There is. This is probably even more vague as well. I grow a different Sauromatum, a little miniature one called Sauromatum horsefieldii. And on the late great Alan Galloway's website, he posted a picture of a lanceolate leaf form of Sauromatum horsefieldii that gets a lot bigger and has these really fancy strappy leaves. And we just, as far as I'm aware, don't grow it in Europe. It's a plant that they grow in the States, and we just can't get it over here. And I fawn over pictures of that late at night fairly regularly, basically, but just can't get it. Nobody can get me it. So if you're listening, Sauromatum horsefieldii lanceolate leaf form is one that I would really like.
Jack Ogg's the man. He's in desperate need.
Please.
Right then, Alan, where are you at with your Flomo then?
I just want all of it. I think, well, there's so many plants that Jack's mentioned today that I've not heard of and I don't know. And you can tell that somehow or other that who but an idiot would grow a Bowiea, for instance.
It's a lovely thing.
Yeah, I think so. But a lot of other people, I got a lady that works for me and she said, when are you going to chuck that whole thing out? Don't do anything. Oh. And I think, well, there we are. Each to their own. But no, I think I need to increase the population of Arums. Definitely Aroids in general, really. And I want to go for things that are hardy because they say, however big your greenhouse, you will fill it. And I have.
Yeah, definitely. I know that one well.
Yeah. And there's plants queuing up to get in the door, really. But we can't keep building another greenhouse. But no, that I particularly would like to grow Dracunculus canariensis, which Jack had a pot of, because I think that could probably live. I don't know. Does it leaf throughout the winter, Jack?
It does. Yeah, it's winter growing. I think if I was in a milder climate further south, it might well be hardy. And up against a wall, if you were growing nerines or amaryllis or something, it would probably cope quite well with that. But it's just not been hardy for me. Why
not try it in your sand bed? Well,
saying that, the close relative of Dracunculus, the dead horse arum, Helicodicerus, I think you pronounce it, which, as the name suggests, has a huge spathe that's all hairy and unpleasant looking and smells like a dead horse, has proved hardy for me. So I'll give it a go. But this Dracunculus canariensis is quite precious to me because it's so unusual. So I'll bulk it up a bit more before I try some outside.
Good for you. Well done.
So, Alan, plenty of nice warm spots at East Ruston where you could give it a go.
Yeah, well, I'm always telling people, the base of a wall. Lots of people think, well, they can't grow anything at the base of a wall because it's too hot, too dry, and all the rest of it. But if you turn that round and look at the kind of plants that might like to live there, for instance, I grow quite a few tender narcissi. They're tender in most people's gardens, but they're not here because of where I put them, and they're basically dry for the winter. And I think that's the key to getting a lot of plants that are less than hardy through the winters, is if you can keep their roots dry, they will take some frost, or you give them a mulch and cover them up for the winter as well. There's all kinds of little tricks and tips that we gardeners do. It's just an interesting way of growing more plants.
Which is our great aim.
Yeah, always.
Always grow more plants. And Jack Ogg, I think you've increased the Aroid Appreciation Society members over here. We are all freshly enthused. We must get you back. I think we need a double act of you and Ben.
I'm up for that. I could do that one.
So we look forward to seeing you in the coming months. But thank you for coming along and just blowing our mind with all of these unusual plants. Everybody needs to go and follow your Instagram and see all the beautiful things you post there as well.
Hopefully, I'll better start posting some more interesting pictures then.
It was lovely to catch up with you and properly chat rather than just follow all your endeavours on social media. We look forward to next time. But in the meantime, happy gardening, everybody.
All the best, Jack. Thank you.
Bye-bye. I have a plant that I can't ID, and I don't know if we could throw that in and see if the viewers might know.
Yeah. Yes.
I have it labelled as Senecio grantii, so a succulent senecio from South Africa, I think it is. But then again, I put it on one of these groups on Facebook, and I had a load of people viciously telling me that I was completely wrong. And so succulent, silvery leaves, and then a big.
Oh, Kleinia.
Who?
Kleinia. Klienia, I think.
Senecio Kleinia or
No, Kleinia.
Kleinia. Excellent. Let me write that down.
There's Fern, hello.
Good morning to you both. How are you?
I'm getting crushed. I'm going to leave you to it. It's about Jack today, not me.
Turn off that light.
Turn off that light, Jack. Come on.
Yeah, you've got like.
I don't know what I've said wrong, but I've said a word and my Alexa has started talking to me.
Okay.